It is the 1st of the 11th, 2025. The time is 23 minutes past 8. And as always, that means one thing and one thing only. There are a multitude of F1 centric threads at which we need to pick and pull. No need to. It's going to get techie, I'm telling you. This one's techier than techie things. I thought the news cycle had done one of these, but it hasn't. We've got to talk about Liam Parker and the state of play as far as what F1 sees itself as. Are we talking about a sport, sports entertainment, or just entertainment, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury? Because he's made a statement and we're going to have to speak to it. Genuine Netflix drive to survivation is what's going on here. So too, we'll pick apart Johnny Herbert and Damon Hill and their soliloquy. They went deep on Max Verstappen. Dick Dastardly tactics. Johnny Herbert came out and said that there is me in Max Verstappen, that I too want to win at all costs. We'll go for it. So too, they talked about Piastri and the Papaya coloured rules, pressure and what it does to a driver. Damon Hill can speak about that 1994 and 1996. It's techie. It is techie, F-boy, today. Very, very techie. Let me play you this in the first instance. And again, look, the context is this. 2021, a gazillion people said, listen, ultimately, per the legends over at Red Flags pod, that Max Verstappen then had plot armor, that one would need to suspend their disbelief, that this, what we were watching in 2021, was now cinema, more entertainment than sport. I'd always argued as a fan, an old grizzled F1 vet, I'd always argued that it was sports entertainment, and therein lies a difference, right? Just a little bit like WWE, but not pure entertainment. Well, Liam Parker, Chief Communication and Corporate Relations Officer at F1, who as a direct report rolls straight up into CEO of F1 Liberty Media, Stefano Domenicali. Here's what he had to say, and it's techie than techie things. Thank the guys and girls over at the Race Media for this clip, but roll it, Cameron.
Why is it important to invest in sort of the cultural zeitgeist programming in addition to just regular distribution of races?
Yeah, I think really importantly now, where we've come over, particularly in the last 5 years, is we're not just a sport anymore. The sport is still the core of who we are, but we've become a cultural phenomenon, we've become an entertainment phenomenon, and if my boss Stefano was sitting here right now, he'd say we're not competing against NASCAR, IndyCar, the NBA. It's not sport, it's entertainment. We're competing for people's time on their iPhones, on their devices, all kinds of different content streams. So we need to be in that space of content and entertainment, but based and grounded in an excellent and incredible sport.
Being a driver in the bubble.
Why is it important to...
Come again, young sir, Liam Parker. You said we're not just the sport. What? That we're now entertainment, competing for attention dollars with the likes of TikTok, Twitter. Yeah, I think I knew this, but to hear it come out of Liam Parker, Chief Communications Officer of Formula One, to hear it come out of that chap's mouth is chaos, chat. This is techier than techie things now. I feel like I'm being priced out as a grizzled F1 vet, that I am a fan of F1 as a sport, but I'm not sure that I'm used to acclimatized to this brand new entertainment thesis. It just doesn't make sense, although it does, doesn't it? Because when you see the sort of the decisions they're making on track, what's going on with the FIA, the regulatory body, as far as $1 billion sports enterprise is concerned, when you hear about terms such as plot armor, these are real things that we see in real life in Formula One, so it only makes sense. F1 is indeed a circus. There's been too much circus and not enough circuit. And Liam Parker, the legend that is, has just confirmed. These are the bosses, by the way. This chap, Liam Parker, who's just said that, I might have to roll the clip again. This chap who's just said that rolls directly in to Stefano Domenicali. He's saying that if Stefano Domenicali were here, that it would be WWE settings NFS, that's what they're doing, that this is deliberate now, by design, not an accident. Let me just roll the clip again, because you can't even believe it, can you? When you listen to that and realise who's saying it, it's like, what is going on? Roll the clip again, Cameron.
Why is it important to invest in sort of the cultural zeitgeist programming in addition to just regular distribution of races?
Yeah, I think think really importantly now where we've come over, particularly in the last 5 years, is we're not just a sport anymore. The sport is still the core of who we are, but we've become a cultural phenomenon, we've become an entertainment phenomenon, and if my boss Stefano was sitting here right now, he'd say we're not competing against NASCAR, IndyCar, the NBA. It's not sport, it's entertainment. We're competing for people's time on their iPhones, on their devices, all kinds of different content streams. So we need to be in that space of content and entertainment, but based and grounded in an excellent and incredible sport.
Why isn't it?
Yeah, we need to be in that space of content and entertainment, not sport. That Stefano Domenicali, head of Formula One, the commercial rights holder, would say that F1, it's not sport, it's entertainment. Oh, the humanity. I thought that we were operating in that Venn diagram, the very small space between sports and entertainment. I thought at worst that we would call ourselves sports entertainment. Well, not according to this chap who, by the way, Liam Parker, Chief Communications and Corporate Relations Officer at Formula One, rolls directly up into Stefano Domenicali. I repeat again for the avoidance of doubt, it's not sport, it's entertainment. Oh, the humanity. That is chaos. Michael is not a clown chap. Sometimes it's not the message, it's the messenger. Liam Parker is Chief Communications. Again, I will reiterate, this is important, chat. This isn't any muggles talking. This guy rolls up as far as the org structure into Stefano Domenicali. He's Chief Communications and Corporate Relations Officer at Formula One. His boss is Stefano Domenicali. This TWM is techie. So I guess this means Lando is winning the World Drivers' Championship. Also confirms Actus Res, not Bob. TWM, you've made the point, right? You've made the point. When Liam Parker's talking like that, if you can forgive Oscar Piastri fans all around the world from doing one of these, well, do you know what I mean? Lando Norris is the prodigal son. A rising Lando Norris tide in 2025 as far as the Drivers' Championship winner floats all commercial arm boats as far as Formula One's concerned. And when you hear them talking like this, it's like, okay, so I get it. Is there necessarily Actus Reus? I don't think this is proof positive of that TWM. Mens rea, I mean, you bet your bottom dollar beyond reasonable doubt now. It's techie, this. It is techie. Alex G will get into it. I need to talk about this. There is a brilliant podcast. I loved it. I didn't think I would like it. It's Damon and it's Johnny Herbert. Two people who've not been too nice to my guy, our guy, Maximilian Verstappen. On the podcast, though, it's not half bad. I'll give them their props. Truth, value and objectivity. I can't shirk from them. I won't sacrifice either one of the aforementioned at the altar of subjectivity or partisanship. I enjoyed listening to it. I did, and we'll go through it. There were clips. Obviously, they talked about Max. Obviously, they talked about Oscar. They talked about the championship and Lando and referenced their careers both all at the same time. It was interesting. Deliora, you're a legend. Here's what you need to know. The context is this. Damon Hill, in his own mind at least, is a straight shooter as far as an F1 pundit, but ultimately that led to him being, in inverted commas, allegedly dismissed from the internationally syndicated Sky Sports F1 broadcast when he said some things about Max Verstappen. To say that his tactics are questionable, techier than techie things. To say that Max is Dick Dastardly, as he does, by the way, again on this podcast, is techier than techie things. Damon hasn't been too kind. And then he went deeper, didn't he, when he was talking, whilst he was a Sky Sports F1 pundit. He said things like, well, sport, as far as Max is concerned, on the back of the moves at Mexico and Cota last year, that sport doesn't build character, it reveals it. That's a direct quote. He went further, saying that if everybody conducted their activities on track like Maximilian Verstappen, then nobody would ever get another overtaking manoeuvre done unstuck. That's techie, chat. I'm not sure that I agree with Damon Hill. Not his message, nor his tone. You better lower it, Damon Hill. How many championships do you have, sir? And I don't want to do this F1 maths because it's not fair. Some people will say, how many championships have you won? Well, none. Well, that doesn't entitle you, therefore, to speak about the sport. And I'm not down with that. I don't think that some of the greatest F1 minds have never driven an F1 car in their life. They are students of it, though, have been writing about it and talking about it all their life as near as makes no difference. The fact that they've never driven an F1 car or driven a sports car of any kind in anger doesn't automatically disqualify them from talking about it. That's being, to say such a thing would be to be an abbot of unreason. That doesn't mean that Damon Hill's been awfully kind to Maximilian Verstappen, man who, per Liam Parker, has dragged the entertainment entity that is F1 on his back, kicking and screaming over the past 3 and 4, maybe even 5 years. Go on then, here's what these guys are saying. In the first instance, they're going to talk about Oscar Piastri. God, techie. The pressures of the championship. And Damon Hill can speak to this because penultimate season, or the season when he lost to Michael Schumacher in 1994 by the hairs on his chinny chin chin, he got techie, didn't it? Suzuka, he pulled it out. If you hear Damon Hill talking about what he had to do in Suzuka, again, he had to meet a Delta. It was a weird circumstance. I want to say he was running in second. It was a weird thing. We'll go back and watch Suzuka 1994, but Damon Hill needed to meet a Delta, match a Delta, in order to keep the championship alive in the final laps of Suzuka in 1994. And he speaks often about entering a flow state, looking up to the heavens and asking Ayrton Senna, his old mate, to help him. It got techie. It got techie. And so I think Damon Hill, whatever you want to say about the chap, is probably, if anybody can talk about handling pressure, then Damon, one-time champion 1996, might well be that guy. Here's in the first instance an expert, your first one, from the Stay in Track podcast. I will link the full podcast in the description. Roll the clip.
It's fantastic. It's exciting, but it's also, it gets to you. There's no doubt about it. There's the weight, and I wonder whether that's the Oscar problem, if it is such a thing as a problem, is there's this weight of, literally a weight. You cannot get to the end. You've got to lead. You wish they could call it now. If they stop the race and if they could stop the championship and say, and now we have to declare a winner because can't do the last 6 races. Then, but I mean, as we're talking now, he's not in the lead. He's 1 point behind. But for a long time, Oscar was holding this weight, and I reckon that they all talk about there's no pressure. Do you remember Nigel Mansell?
Mm-hmm. I do remember him.
It was a foregone conclusion he was going to become a world champion with the car he had, which was the Williams car, the FW14, which is the active car, and it was way better than anyone else's, and he was winning it by miles, sort of thing. So, and everyone kept on saying to Nigel, you're going to win the championship. He deferred it. He kicked it into the long grass every time he was asked the question. He wouldn't go there. He wouldn't discuss it. And I think mentally you have to do that. You have to say, it's like in a race, it's no good starting to think about the checker flag when you're 10 laps from the end. Because the moment you do that, you want it to be finished, but you're not there yet. You've got to get to the 10, and you mustn't get out of that state of mind. So
that's how you handle pressure, according to Damon Hill. And if you're talking about Oscar Piastri, season to date, about 10 races ago, he was going gangbusters, right? The first 9 races of the season, what was it? 4 poles, 5 race wins. The subsequent 10, 1 pole, 2 wins. It's not looking good, bruv. And then when you look at the previous 4 races, no podiums of which Oscar Piastri can speak. Now, potentially you might say, well, this is just seasonal variance. Drivers rock up to any given track and they have their preference. Lewis always goes well at Canada and Silverstone. Maximilian Verstappen is almost unbeatable around Singapore. Different drivers have their preference, and going into the dying embers, the final third of the season, the tracks that we visit aren't necessarily Oscar Piastri tracks. Mark Hughes already has written the article that low grip doesn't suit Oscar Piastri's very linear, aggressive braking style. He's either on the accelerator or 100% off it, and therefore on the brake. He doesn't overlap like a Lando and Norris, and that's why you see over the course of a weekend, if we're at a low grip track like we were at Mexico, that early on it's Orlando, right? It is Orlando, and as soon as the track starts to evolve, Oscar Piastri, it's convergent settings. But that still, I don't think that explains the extent to the drop-off, because we have this conversation under the aegis of this being a difference in extents and not kinds. Oscar was going gangbusters, and then we got Baku, and then we had Mexico, and then it was Austin. He's been nowhere since. Okay, so the drive back in Austin, in Mexico even, was good. That looked like the old Oscar Piastri. But then there are other races. You're looking at car 81, asking the question, who is that dude in that car, and what has he done with our Oscar? He doesn't look the same, even in the press conference. And again, you can read into this whatever. Sometimes countenance doesn't count for nothing. This may well be a nothing burger to which we speak. But see him in the pre-race presser over at Mexico, I'm like, what? Who is this dude? He looks defensive. His body language, he looks shy, normally so robust and stoic. I'm like, what? Who is that dude in car 81, and what has he done with Oscar? I mean, he looks and feels different. Now, he said that as far as his process, he's not going to do anything different. But Damon and Johnny talked to it in a minute, that his manager, Mark Webber, said before this season, Oscar Piastri had never ever taken a wheel off of a car. 0 damage settings, so almost metronomically consistent had that dude been as far as his forensic car placement. Brilliant, even all career, even in the feeder formula in F2 and F3, but this in F1 is different. Then Baku happens, and it gets techier than techie things. Listen, Oscar, again, he had the luxury points advantage, didn't he? But since that's all gone to pot, as at the time of writing, there is 1 point between the driver championship lead in Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri in second. Roll the clip.
You know, he had the luxury of points advantage, and then suddenly he drops the ball. Now, I remember Mark Webber saying this guy had not even so much as done a corner on a car before. And then he gets to Baku and he does 2 tubs, I think. I think he basically, literally the wheels fell off.
Yeah, quite literally.
So,
yes.
The only explanation you can have for that is that somehow the mindset has changed from being someone who just was looking at each race and seeing it as an individual goal or an individual challenge or a separate individual challenge, which is actually the right way to go about it. In other words, if you just take each race at a time, then what will be will be.
Yes, that's the better way of doing it, for sure, yes. In Baku, it's almost like he was chasing himself and trying to push himself out of a comfort zone that he didn't need to.
True, Johnny Herbert. And that's weird, right? For somebody that's always been focused more on the processes than the outcomes. It did look like he was chasing himself, overdriving the car now with a view to bridge the gap to an ostensibly in better form and therefore quicker teammate in Lando Norris. It's techie. They all go through slumps, says Chiba. This is true. But again, we have this conversation under the aegis of extents and not kinds. It's techie for Oscar, this. This is DEFCON 1. I want him to do well at the very least. I don't want him to bottle it because I like me some Oscar Piastri. But again, I say for the avoidance of doubt, who is that fella in car 81 and what has he done without Oscar Piastri? F1 pressure broke Oscar's stoic demeanour, 100%. Mate, well, it looks like that. Again, correlation does not necessarily imply causation. But what else are you going to chalk it up to? Gregor says Damon is 100% right. Max can't drive wheel to wheel. We'll get to that, I promise you. Heidi says that they just hate Max. Go on, let's deal with this Oscar Piastri circumstance first. Oscar's starting to crumble, say Johnny Herbert and Damon Hill of the Stay in Track podcast. Roll the clip.
You've been out in the lead and you've never won a major. And he started to crumble.
Yeah.
Because you're carrying that load mentally for so long. And so I think that finally those things have happened with Oscar. And I think he's feeling it's cramped his style. But that's because I'm Oscar and you're Lando. So now Lando. You've been out in the lead and you've never won a major.
Chaos chat. What Damon Hill's saying is the truth, right? There is a tax to be paid from being the hare so frequently. If you're in the lead of the championship so far between, so early on as far as the 24 race season, then it's bound to take a toll. This isn't advanced mathematics. This is not Fermat's last theorem. This is basics. This is counting. Of course it will take a toll. And maybe Oscar Piastri, maybe his performance has dropped off in no small part due to the ramifications of bearing that pressure burden for so long. Techie, Now we're talking about Maximilian Verstappen, because they're talking about Damon Hill says that Max didn't maximise for his opportunity over at the Mexican Grand Prix. That person's lot. Lando was the one who did it right off the start, 800 metres down to turn 1. And where was the start bottle job that we've seen so frequently this year and last? Nowhere to be seen. Again, I say for the avoidance of that, who's that chap in the Lando number 4 car? And what has he done with our start bottle job, Lando Norris? It is not lost on me that as Lando Norris starts to find the form of his life, that Oscar Piastri is going the other way. This is Divergence PLC, isn't it? They speak to it in the following excerpt. Roll the clip.
And you've got to be, yeah.
We haven't really mentioned Max, but here he is. Is either the T-Max or
he's the coming man, isn't he?
But he's got a car he can do it with. They've done something, and he's on the move definitely. But he didn't maximise, no pun intended, in Mexico. Lando did.
Yeah.
So that's kind of taken the wind out of his sails a bit. But we've got this Brazil race coming up.
Yeah.
Which is a sprint.
As well, yes. Nice little addition.
And he's quite good there quite often.
He's quite good there quite often. Begrudging praise any Damon. Let me double click on the first bit though. The first clause of Damon Hill's soliloquy. He says that Max didn't maximise. How? You expect him to win the race in an RB21 that doesn't go well around the Mexican Grand Prix circuit? What? That's not the race that I watched, Damon. I respectfully, sir, disagree vehemently. That's nonsense. Max, of course, maximise, and again, like you guys are saying in the chat, but for a cheeky virtual safety car when Carlos Sainz had removed the car well out of the way of danger. Ergo, no need for the safety car, the virtual safety car in the dying embers of the Mexican Grand Prix. But for that, Maximilian Verstappen would have finished second. What else did you expect him to do in that car then, with a Lando Norris in a fire-breathing dragon of an F1 car in the MCL3? What else did you expect? Now, I don't think like this. I know everybody says that Damon Hill and Johnny Herbert fall victim as far as their objectivity at the first hurdle to some British bias. I get it. I understand it. I'm not sure that I'm on that train. I just think they, for the most part, they shoot straight, have now always, and will always do that. But when you hear Damon Hill say something like that, I'm like, I forgive Maximilian Verstappen fans for doing one of these. This is what the dude always says. He's got an axe to grind against Max Verstappen because he and he are very, very different. There is a chasm as far as the way they like to go racing, and Damon Hill will never reconcile himself with that. You'll hear it over the next couple of excerpts because Johnny Herbert gets techie, then techie things. Roll the next clip.
That's where my smiley nice side out of the cockpit is very different when in the cockpit, and I will try and use any of the gamesmanship that I can. And I then go back to Max. That's what Max does so brilliantly with the rules that we have. And I hate the rules that we have.
That's Johnny Herbert speaking, by the way. Did you hear him? That's what Max does so brilliantly within the rules. We said it earlier, post-Mexico Grand Prix, that Max will always make the stewards and the race director make a decision. He's always been aware of the rules. Sometimes does he operate within the shades of grey? Is he marginal? Does he have the propensity? Is a penchant even for a cheeky line step? You bet your bottom dollar he does. But which champion in history not named Damon Hill does not have that? This is the point that Johnny Herbert is making now.
Yes.
So the
and
rules,
he uses those.
And I think I was very critical last year's Brazilian Grand Prix, and I called him Dick Dastardly, and
that's right.
Which is a famous cartoon character from the 19 whatever.
Yeah. You were very popular.
The 1900s. No, it wasn't that long ago. It was like the 1960s. But no.
Excuse me, Damon. This is where it gets techie as far as Damon Hill is concerned, because it's not necessarily the message that offends gazillions and gazillions of Max Verstappen fans all around the world. It's the tone. It's the verbiage. Why do you need to talk about dastardly analogies? I would say that that's ever so slightly disrespectful for a dude who potentially could win his 5th championship back to back this year. I think he's mismanaged. The packaging isn't commensurate with who Max Verstappen is and what he means to Formula One as at the time of writing. But I digress.
1970s. But anyway, so Dick Dastardly, fiendish character who resorted to foul means to gain an advantage in wacky races. So I likened Max's driving to that. But of course, what he was doing was he was saying, well, the rules say this. If you're taking the line, you're overtaking on the inside, and you've got your, I can't remember, it's mirrors and front wheels.
Well, now it's mirrors.
You're the blooming FIA.
Now it's mirrors.
I can't keep up. They keep changing the bloody rules.
I know, but that's because the drivers want to keep changing it, and the teams want to keep changing it.
They
want to make it as in the most difficult way that you can't pass. So that's why there's all those rules.
He knows that if you dive.
It's an important point that Johnny Herbert's making, because we know that there is a differential between the overtaking rules as they were in 2024 as versus 25. That it's now more difficult for the dude around the outside, because the dude on the inside needs not to give them any space if they are the defender of the move. And this is where it gets a bit techie and polemic, because if the drivers are putting forth and influencing, effecting change for the rules and regs, then surely when the stewards institute for them, if that's what they're doing in a way that's consistent and fair across all related parties, then surely the drivers shouldn't be complaining. But this is a big if, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm guessing if we had Max Verstappen on the line, he'd argue, and George and Lewis, he'd argue that it's the consistency of said implementation that just isn't happening and hasn't been happening in F1 for the past 3 or 4 or 10 years.
If you dive for the apex and then got
get
no
to the
hope
apex first,
of making the exit, we saw it with Kimi Antonelli, didn't we? And Ollie Behrman, was it in Austin? The rules are, if you got to the apex first, so people take these massive dives from miles back, no hope of making the corner, because they know the rules will allow them to then run the person off the track.
Yes. What's changed with Max, just so I'll go back to that one in Mexico, weirdly enough, is because you remember Mexico Turn 2, and I can't remember, that was with Max and Lando, I think, last year. You remember Max, I think, pushed Lando off into the grass, if I remember correctly, at Turn 2.
I mean, there's so many of those, I can't keep up.
Now, the rule used to be that you
see Damon getting in an additional supplementary dig. There's so many of those that I can't quite keep up. Yeah, Damon, because this is F1. Damon mentioned something earlier that's quite important. For context, it colours everything that he said. Damon never raced in karts. All of these bods currently on the grid come through karts. That's their breeding ground. That's where they cut their teeth, learn the basics, brass tacks and rules of first principle as far as racecraft is concerned. Damon didn't come up through karting. He was always on about bikes, wasn't he? Until latterly, he realised that F1 was potentially his calling, a sport in which he'd ultimately go on to win a championship in 1996. But because Damon doesn't have that karting grounding, he doesn't understand the rubbing is racing thesis, that the ambitious dive bomb, that utility and getting it done is all that matters in Formula One. All of these 20 drivers currently on the grid have at some point cut their teeth in karting, and that's where that sort of stuff comes from. The ambitious dive bomb into turn 1 is a function of asymmetric whisk. That's where you can gain the most positions for free, as near as makes no difference. Dirty air settings, avoid that, because per Oscar Piastri, clean air is king. Understand that, and you will understand the reason why these guys race the way that they do, particularly Max Verstappen, who definitely cut all of his teeth, euphemistically speaking, in karting.
You had to give space.
Yeah.
And that was where it all got a little bit. That's why he got a penalty, because he didn't give Lando
then they
space.
said, but that's not racing.
No,
and
then he goes, no, racing, right.
It's not
so
racing,
then they've changed the rule, and I remember George actually was very vocal on it, and I totally agree with it. Is when you have someone going around the outside, you're on the inside, you're on the outside. I should be able to take my racing line, because actually I'm on the racing line.
Yeah,
you're not. And the rule now is that you don't have to give space. Yeah. So that has changed as well. But that's a more racy way of doing things. You're aware that I'm going to use all that road. Yeah. Now, are you going to risk it? Probably not. But when the rule was you've got to give space, you would go for it.
Well, this is where
that's where it all gets very
I got a bit annoyed because Brazil
Damon goes on to say he got a bit annoyed with Max last year and his opponents more so because Max was just going around the outside, not dissimilar to what he did in 2016, was finding grip on the karting line, going through turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, the long left-hander going into the big straight at Interlagos. Well, if listen, you gotta play the way that you're facing, right? You can only beat those who are put in front of you, and if they're allowing you to do that, then you can't. Don't hate the player, Damon Hill. Hate the game. There's the rules and regs. There exists the karting line in the wet that some say has more grip. Because again, you got to remember that the karting line is such that, I mean, you want the racing line in the dry because that's where it's rubbered. But if you blend water with a rubbered in racing line, that makes this weird sticky material upon which there is less grip in the wet. Therefore, that's why you see Max going round the outside to Trailer Park Girls go round the outside in turn 3 at Interlagos. Has brilliant success there and probably will have brilliant success there this year when it rains again. It's as if people don't do their due diligence and see where the bloody grip is. However, you know what, in defence of the other 1918, because Lewis Hamilton does that sometimes, karting line settings, in their defence, the counter argument is this in the wet, that if you are going to lose it and you're on the racing line, then you give yourself a greater margin of error. If you lose it and you're on the karting line, then you've got no chance. You're off in an instant because you're that much closer to the outside of track, whether it's gravel or grass. It's going to get to, I swear, this is techie as far as Johnny Herbert and Damon Hill now talking about what's going on as far as the rules and the regulations and Max's ability to tax avoid for them, to ensure that he does something cheeky and doesn't get prosecuted. I think that's his genius. You guys can say as much as you want, and they will say, Damon Hill will say that Max is Dick Dastardly. Listen, is this not racecraft? Is this not the ability, is this not devilment that so characterises those who operate at the highest level in F1? Rewind the Ayrton Senna. Please see Alain Prost in 1989. Michael Schumacher's Nears makes no different every single bloody year. 94, 97. Parks it up in Monaco in 2002, if I recall. 2015, Nico Rosberg. Is F1 really F1 if there is no skullduggery? Open and honest, non-rhetorical question. And they continue, because Damon Hill's got some things to say about this dastardly stuff, hasn't he? But he was fuming last year in 2024 and Brazil, not necessarily at Max Verstappen, but at his opponents for allowing him to go round the outside to Trailer Park Girls. Roll the clip.
Yes.
Max. And he's famously used his, well, I think questionable driving tactics to keep people either behind him or overtake people.
Sure.
What do you think about that? You're ex-driver steward.
Yes. Well, there are. I think as we know very, very well, there are situations that you don't want to give up your spots, or you want to try and overtake the guy in front. It's how you execute that. And I think what we've seen, we've both been critical of what we've seen, but we saw, for example, when he overtook Max, when Max overtook Lewis going into turn 1 in Mexico, I thought that was brilliant. Right on the edge, very late, but he made the move. There was a little bit of tyre rubbing, and that's part of racing. You know, it's not going to be completely clean, as in no one's going to touch each other, because that's not how it works. Now, there have been those occasions where, like Lewis has said to Lando, you've got to play hardball to be able to take it to him, I suppose.
Max doesn't even wake up for anything less than hardball at this juncture. Now, listen, there is a way to deal with Max. Charles Leclerc has showed you to the best of his ability, probably better than any other driver on the grid. I've always argued that Charles Leclerc, when he's racing Max, and Oscar to a certain extent at Miami this year, Charles Leclerc does this Steven Seagal thing. He's like an Aikido master of an F1 peddler, where he redirects Max Verstappen's aggression and uses it against him. I think Charles Leclerc is brilliant for doing that. It's just a shame that he bloody makes so many errors of the unforced variety to accompany that. However, I mean, God doesn't give everybody everything, right? You can't have all that pace and all those bloody good looks, Charles Leclerc, and not have some downside. Please see, enter stage left. These mistakes of the unforced for Ride. To roll this next clip again, Damon Hill talking about the dastardly tactics. For me, it's not the message, it's the packaging, it's the verbiage that he uses, it that he dresses up this message with. Roll the clip.
If you just, is it possession is 9/10 of the law? In other words, just do it, and then we'll argue about it later.
Well, that's the
I
other
think
thing
that's
as
what
well.
Michael used to. That's his
yes,
approach
as well.
to
You're
racing.
right. Absolutely, yes.
But I think the watershed moment was. And there's always been what I would call dastardly driving, but I think Ayrton was the first to really kind of go, okay, if we're here to race. This is how I race, and he was very ruthless. I mean, the T-boning or knocking Alan or not giving him any margin into turn one in Suzuka.
Yeah. But he did tell everybody
he was going to do it, which is like, that's not very wise, is it? I just want to say, if you're contemplating any illegal acts, Bernie's had this interesting thing.
It's interesting. I tell you what, I think this is a conversation that's going to rage and rage. This is now the parameters within which we have these conversations. It's F1 barbershop talk, isn't it? We'll never agree. Listen, some will be like grey F1 veterans will say, listen, this is Max's remit. He's always going to drive hard, as did Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost, and God knows 1,000 other drivers before him. It is just the way he likes to drive. So understand it and combat it. Therefore, it's techie. It is techie. Charles Leclerc always so lovely to watch. Very, very smooth. OG Sealer says, if you bang wheels with the outside car and push them off, you should not count either. So here's the problem, OG Sealer, with this banging. I remember Michael Schumacher always used to hang out the driver to. If you tried to overtake Michael Schumacher around the outside, you had no chance. It was as if you were trying to slap him in his face. That's how we'd view it. It was a flipping cheek. And Max is the same thing. You've heard him in interviews saying, well, nobody will ever overtake me around the outside unless my car is broken. Because the physics of it is techie. You're travelling so much further. You've got to be travelling so much quicker to make and stick a move if you're going around the outside. And that's why grizzled F1 peddlers and vets view it as a flipping cheat. You're going to try and overtake me around the outside. It's cheek. It's like throwing a right-hand lead in boxing. It's an assumption that I'm so much better than you that I can make this very ambitious move round the outside. Two trailer park girls go round the outside. Stick. It's techie. TWM. Safak, are you watching? Safak, I didn't even know there was a game. That's the joke. That's how much of a noddy F1 and football fan I am. Here's the next one. Roll the clip.
And also he divides opinion, or divides
yes,
so if you're in the steward's room, people are scratching their heads going, is that allowed? And he's worked it out that the rules say that if you got it's this, then I'm allowed to do it.
So you do the steward.
Yeah.
Well, we have driving standards that we have to abide by because it's the teams and the drive. If most people think when there is a penalty given, it's because the stewards decide, which we do, that's a penalty. But the guidelines, the driver guidelines that are done by the drivers and the teams, is that what they want us.
Yeah.
To apply those penalties for. But when we apply them, then someone gets all hissy-fitty over the decision. Yeah, but that's what you wanted.
And also,
it's techie that from Johnny Herbert. I think people wouldn't have an issue, Johnny Herbert, if it was as you stated. The problem is, sir, a gazillion F1 fans can't be wrong when they say that the rules aren't instituted for in a way that's consistent, fair, across all related parties. Therein lies the issue. I could throw a gazillion examples. Transpondergate, when it was Perez and Lando Norris full start. And you remember a couple of years ago when Lando Norris dropped it on pole only for his lap to get struck off. Lewis was on pole and then the stewards changed their mind because they didn't disable the bloody automatic detection thingy around that track that time. There are a gazillion others. Oscar Piastri and the bloody, in fact, the Ferrari coming together at the last Grand Prix in Mexico, Charles Leclerc and Lewis, like, what's going on there? What, you're going to allow that the team to sort it out? Well, Lewis won't be too happy about that. What are we doing? Matthew Brown, you're a legend. More choir boy virtue signalling from the one-hit wonder who could only win without Michael Schumacher in the championship fight in 1996. Matthew Brown, you make the point. And you know what the joke is? I'll tell you this, Matthew Brown. You know, I'll talk about Jenson Button. Never been a big fan. Never meet your heroes. Everybody said that Jenson Button was a nice guy, that you want to go and have a drink with him. Do you know what I mean? Joe Blogs public, no airs or graces. When I've met Jenson Button, honestly, my mama Cameron would always say, if you've got nothing nice to say, then don't say it at all. So I will full stop a new paragraph there. Damo, though, you meet Damon Hill, I promise you, whatever you want to say about his opinions, and we might all disagree with the way that he characterises and talks about and disparages Maximilian Verstappen, for some say soon to be 5-time. Meet Damo in person, though. I'm telling you, everything that people pitched me on Jenson Button, if I were to meet him in person, everything that they said about Jenson Button, Damon Hill was actually signed my book, and that's why, chat, I struggle to talk disparagingly. I disagree vehemently with everything that Damon's saying here, but as a bloke, as a person, when I met him in person, he was a good guy, and that's why I can't jump up and down and stomp my feet at the altar of Damon Hill. And then Johnny Herbert says this about Max. That's what he does, and there's a reason for it.
That's where my smiley nice side out of the cockpit is very different when in the cockpit, and I will try and use any of the gamesmanship that I can, and I then go back to Max. That's what Max does so brilliantly with the rules that we have, and I hate the rules that we have.
Hang on a second. Who is this fella and what has he done with Johnny Herbert? It's interesting to see Johnny Herbert on a mic. I tell you why I'd recommend this podcast, and I will link the full pod in the description, because at Sky Sports F1, and they make a joke about this sky. Damon Hill says they fell from the sky and have ended up here doing podcasts. Here's what's interesting. Damon and Johnny Herbert, for the most part, notwithstanding that they're but they were two of the only bots. Damon was one of the only ones to have ever won a World Drivers' Championship on the F1 broadcast. But they were kind of sidelined. They were desserts, never the main course, right? So to hear them both talking long form and feed off of each other under the aegis of their experiences, respectively, in F1, for me is a breath of fresh air. I never thought I would hear Johnny Herbert speaking like this. So disparaging was he about Alonso when Alonso wanted to... Remember that time when Alonso said he was going to race on, notwithstanding his injury? FIA decided that, you know what, Alonso, we're going to save you from yourself. But Johnny Herbert was like, mate, if that's what's going on, then maybe you might want to retire. Alonso walked into Johnny Herbert's interview and said, listen, Johnny, you never won a championship, so of course I would expect somebody like you to say that. Like, it's techie, but hearing Johnny in long form, he's infinitely, exponentially better than I or you have ever given him credit. You can hear him there basically saying that he'd do the bloody same. This is how champions move. If you really, really want something, per Christian Horner, quote, you will do anything to get it. Christian Horner's words are not mine, and it sounds like Johnny Herbert and I and you are singing from the same hymn sheet here.
Yes.
So the
and
rules,
he uses those.
And I think I was very critical last year's Brazilian Grand Prix, and I just called him Dick Dastardly,
That's right.
which is a famous cartoon character from the 19 whatever.
Yeah. You were very popular.
The 1900s. No, it wasn't that long. It was only 1960s, but 1970s. But anyway, so Dick Dastardly, fiendish character who resorted to foul means to gain an advantage in wacky races. So I likened Max's driving to that, but of course what he was doing was he was saying, well, the rules say this: if you're taking the line, you're overtaking on the inside, and you've got your, I can't remember, it's mirrors and front wheels.
Well, now it's mirrors.
You're the blooming FIA.
Now it's mirrors.
I can't keep up. They keep changing the bloody rules.
I know, but that's because the drivers want to keep changing it, and the teams want to keep changing it. They want to make it as in the most difficult way that you can't pass.
So
that's why there's all those rules.
He knows that if you dive for the apex and then get
no
to the
hope
apex first, of making the exit. Yeah. We saw it with Kimi Antonelli, didn't we? And Ollie Behrman, was it in Austin?
Yeah.
The rules are, if you got to the apex first, so people take these massive dives from miles back, no hope of making the corner because they know the rules will allow them to then run the person off the track.
Yes. What's changed with Max, just so I'll go back to that one in Mexico, weirdly enough, is because you remember Mexico Turn 2, and I can't remember, that was with Max and Lando, I think, last year. You remember Max,
Correct.
I think, pushed Lando off into the grass, if I remember correctly, at Turn 2.
I mean, there's so many of those, I can't keep up.
Now, the rule used to be that you had to give space.
Yeah.
And that was where it all got a little bit. That's why he got a penalty, because he didn't give
Because
Lando
then they
space.
said, well, that's not racing.
No,
and
then he goes, no, racing, right.
It's not
so
racing,
then they've changed the rule, and I remember George actually was very vocal on it, and I totally agree with it. Is when you have someone going around the outside, you're on the inside, you're on the outside. I should be able to take my racing line, because actually I'm on the racing line.
Yeah,
you're not. And the rule now is that you don't have to give space.
Yeah.
So that has changed as well, but that's a more racy way of doing things. You're aware that I'm going to use all that road.
Yeah.
Now, are you going to risk it? Probably not. But when the rule was
inside line privilege, it's always been that way, and it always should be that way.
You've got to give space. You would go for it.
Well, this is where
that's where it all gets very.
I mean, I got a bit annoyed because.
Inside line privilege is a thing in Formula One. Of course, I should be able to run you off the road. That's what inside line privilege is. If I have the inside line, then I have the turn. It's always been that way, and it always should be. I don't think the FIA need to complicate the rules any more than that. There should be, of course, gentlemanly, common amongst thieves, right? A man needs to have a code. But bloody Nora, what are we doing here? Listen, I'll tell you this much though. Rate Johnny Herbert on the back of this final excerpt. He looks Damon Hill in the white of his eyes and said, you know what, mate? For all of your shenanigans, all of this gentlemanly conduct, you were super quick. But if we were in the same car and they tried to say anything about Papaya rules, if they tried to do this organised chaos thing, then I would drive over you. Roll this clip.
Oh, if we were teammates and we were going for the championship, you wouldn't have known what was going to hit you from my side. Oh, yeah. If we had a little meeting together. Yes, whoever gets into turn one first,
Yeah,
that is the one who's going to win that race and win that championship. I would have just driven over you to make sure that I did win.
I don't doubt
but it never happened.
No, sadly for you, you never got close enough to find out what you would have done. And we
if we were teammates and we were going for
I tell you, chat, it's good. I don't mean to be on here advertising a next podcast, but stay on track. Johnny Herbert, Damon Hill, by dint of the race media, he's got it. I will link the full pod in the description. So you like the gamesmanship, but you hate the rules. Why? Because Max does what you just don't have the guts to do to win. 2 complete pushovers, says Matthew Brown. Oh, the humanity. I think they come from a different place. I think the lens through which they ingest F1, particularly from Damon Hill's perspective, is very different. Polar opposites, orthogonal to Max Verstappen's peculiar brand of racecraft. Damon's very 1950s. He's Graham Hill's son, for Pete's sake. Sports, gentleman settings, and I get it, but they're never going to agree with Max Verstappen's code of conduct on the track, because Max cares not. He's a sledgehammer of a driver. Do you know what I mean? A Swiss Army knife, anything. Again, they say that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, but the most adaptable to change. And in that vein, Max Verstappen is a Swiss Army knife of a driver. Of course he's going to do everything that he can do to get the dub. Have you ever thought this subject keeps coming up because he keeps running? Go on, let's read out this and then we'll talk about it. Because he keeps running people off the road, says Gregor. I would argue, Gregor, that if you rewind, I don't think this is a linear thing as far as Max's aggression on track in the first instance. Secondly, if you look back in 2021, are you telling me that Max is driving the same way now as he was then? I think it's more nuanced than that, Gregor. I mean, if you've got an axe against Max Verstappen to grind, then you've got an axe to grind against him, then that's your business. But I think it's more nuanced than that, particularly when you see, I mean, you've read the Mark Hughes article at this stage. When you see who Max is and what he's dealing with as far as what he needs to do to get over the hump and win a 5th back-to-back, you understand that in a 3-way championship, what you can't afford to do is DNF. thought he was mighty at the Mexican Grand Prix in stark contrast to Damon Hill. I thought he absolutely optimised for his very difficult circumstance. He got a bit too dicey for me, if I'm honest, against Lewis Hamilton, because again, Max, if he's to win a championship, can't afford any DNFs, and that's where it gets techie, TWM trauma settings, as all. Yeah, it does feel a little bit like trauma settings potentially. So we have two disgruntled pundits of Formula One coming together and creating a podcast. This will definitely be something to see, says Eddie. Eddie, it's a good listen, mate. If you like yourself some F1, I promise you'll enjoy. I enjoyed it. Two F1 drivers bantering about what they see F1 to be, particularly on the back of that Liam Parker, the first excerpt that we spoke to, when Liam Parker's talking about Stefano Domenicali would say that F1 is now entertainment, not sport. Mate, if that's where we are, then mate, this, ladies and gentlemen, is chaos. Absolute chaos. We're back to normal scheduling, of course. You guys go enjoy some football. We'll be back same time tomorrow, 10 a.m. and 8 p.m, dissecting all of the relevant bits and bobs in the weird and wacky world that is the F that wonks over humanity.